Commissioners, welcome to the August 13th Planning Commission meeting. I will be conducting this meeting in the absence of our chair, Ms. Parakis. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available at the entrance to the room. Agendas and minutes of prior meetings are available on the city website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission. State law establishes planning commissions. This planning commission is comprised of 9 residents appointed to serve our community. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the city council. Other individuals participating in the meeting include representatives of the city's planning department, city attorney's office, and the city's planning consultant, Carlisle Wortman and Associates. If you wish to address the Planning Commission, please come forward to the lectern when recognized and clearly print your name and address on the sign-in sheet. Please bring your remarks by stating your name for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the Planning Commission, not to anyone else in the room. If you have a cell phone or any other device that might disrupt this meeting, please either switch it to silent mode or turn it off. At this time, I will ask the Planning Commission Recording Secretary, Ms. Kathy Zornecki, to conduct the roll call.
Mr. Buechner?
Here.
Mr. Faison?
Here.
Mr. Fox?
Here.
Mr. Hudson? Mr. Krent?
Here.
Mr. Lambert?
Here.
Ms. Malala Hawley?
Here.
Ms. Parakis? Mr. Tagle?
Here.
Quorum present, Madam Chair. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Zornecki. Next, we will do the approval of tonight's agenda. Does anyone wish to make a motion to approve?
Sure.
First by Chairman Commissioner Krent, seconded by Commissioner Faison. Ms. Zornecki, we are ready for roll call.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala Hawley?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Buechner?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We now move on to the approval of the minutes from our July 23rd meeting. Does anyone want to?
So moved.
Have moved by Commissioner Fox and seconded by Mr. Buechner. Ms. Zornecki, any discussion on the? Ms. Zornecki, may I call on you to do the roll call again?
Chair, Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala Hawley?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Buechner?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next, we move on to the public comments for items not on the agenda. If anyone would like to address the commission, please come to the lectern now, sign your name and address. Seeing none rushing to the lectern, we will go on to the next item. We now move on to item number 5, which is the preliminary site plan approval, JPLN 2023-0020, proposed the Rookery of Troy mixed-use development, west of Dickwinder, south of Long Lake, parcels 88-20-13-228-003 and 88-20-13-228-015, Section 13, currently zoned NN, Neighborhood Node J District. Mr. Carlisle or Brent will be doing, Mr. Ben will be doing the presentation. Mr. Carlisle.
Thank you and good evening. A little background about the project tonight before us. The site is approximately 6 acres in area. It fronts on Dickwinder and is just south of Long Lake. We do note that there is the box highlighted in yellow is designated as a future commercial use. That will come under a separate application, we believe, in the next couple months or so. What the applicant is proposing is a mixed-use development. It's commercial on the frontage adjacent to Dickwinder, residential in the rear, and there'll be a shared access drive off Dickwinder to service all, both the commercial uses, the future commercial use, and the residential use. As noted, the site is zoned neighborhood node, and small-scale retail office uses and attached residential are permitted uses. Again, a note that that 0.75 portion of the area is under a future application. The Planning Commission reviewed this at your July 9th meeting, and the matter was postponed to address the following items, and I'll go over each of these in individual detail. The first item was proposed was to provide a wall detail on the southern end of the property. There's a proposed wall on the southern end as used as buffering from the adjacent residential properties. That proposed wall is a masonry material, brick material, and the details and cross sections of that wall are shown on the plan set. There was a requirement to provide height calculations on the property elevations. The residential height is measured to a peak of 26 feet 8 inches, which is below the height requirement, height maximum in the neighborhood node district, and the commercial height is measured to a peak of 27 feet 4 inches. Planning Commission asked for additional landscaping as part of a resubmittal, and we do note, and I'll just quickly, if you ever, the Planning Commission can look at the top screen. There was a request to prevent additional screen along the northern elevation property line, and specifically along the road that's kind of adjacent or very close to the northern property line. So the applicants added a row of arborvitae to provide additional screening and buffer along this northern road section. They were asked to supplement gaps in the trees along both the south and west property line. So the applicant has added additional trees along both these property lines, as well as put shrub screen along the patios. So there was discussion at the last Planning Commission about patios and where they'd be located. This graphic now indicates patios, and the applicant has put some shrubs to screen those from the adjacent neighbors. And lastly, there was a discussion about, this is guest parking, and there was a discussion about adding some additional screening here to ensure that the headlights from the those parking spaces didn't go into these adjacent residential. So they've added some additional landscape screening along that section. So from our understanding, they have addressed all the landscaping suggestions from the Planning Commission. In addition, the Planning Commission asked for additional recreation amenities. You see these three little, they're hard to see in this scale, but these three little red circles are butterfly gardens with some, I believe, some seating areas adjacent to them. So again, adds a very passive use to the property for outdoor use. Planning Commission discussed elevations and spent a lot of time on elevations for both projects. The residential product, I believe the Planning Commission felt very strongly that and very strong support of. However, there was discussion on the commercial. The material of the commercial includes a mix of brick, stone, metal roof, and what we deem is a significant amount of EIFS. So this white material and this gray material are an EIFS material. As we know in the form-based districts, EIFS really is only permitted as an accent material. There was discussion about reducing that material. I reviewed the elevations. I didn't see a change between what the Planning Commission saw and what they resubmitted. So from our vantage point, it's still a significant amount of EIFS and something the Planning Commission should discuss with the applicant. The Planning Commission, based on that previous discussion, also, as I noted, had a long discussion about patios and where they'd be located. So the applicant has added 10 by 14 foot patios to each unit. And these internal patios are going to be screened from the adjacent neighbors with a shrub row. I believe the last comment was amending the photometric plan. We did note that the height of the proposed pole lights were about 22 feet, so we asked them to reduce that to 14 feet. They were able to lower it to 15 feet, which we felt was a good compromise. However, in order to do so, they had to add 2 additional lights, but we felt that that was adequate to ensure that the lights were a lower height than what was originally proposed. Oh, sorry, this is the last comment. The Planning Commission did request a review of the location of the crosswalks for better location and more. They've added, I believe, at least 2 additional crosswalks, and those have been reviewed by city staff and felt those are appropriate locations for the crosswalks, so they have met that condition as well. Just real quickly, again, these are the elevations of the commercial building. This is DeQuinder, and this is going to be the internal road. And then these are the proposed elevations of the residential units, which the Planning Commission was very supportive of. That concludes my last thing. Planning Commission is to consider the site plan standards and specifically discuss if EIFS should be replaced with an alternative material. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlisle, for the presentation. Does anybody have any question for Mr. Carlisle or Mr. Savadant at this time? Go ahead, Mr. Fox.
Mr. Carlisle, just for the sake of just refreshing our memory, so the reason that the city has such a stipulation on EIFS specifically, that has to do with the overall durability of the material, or could you elaborate a bit more on why?
It's a long discussion that we had that really started a number of years ago. And I will say that when it was, and Mr. Teo can speak much better from an architect's standpoint, when we first looked at this, EIFS really was a lower quality material. And so there was a durability and coupled with an aesthetic reason. Especially EIFS at a lower level is, it can be kicked, it can be hit, rocks can hit it, it can hit, so we really discourage it, especially at a lower level. So at the time, there was discussion about limiting EIFS really to accent material, specifically at higher elevations. So again, durability and aesthetic reasons. I will say though that the quality of EIFS has improved since that initial discussion of the Planning Commission, but we do find that a lot of times it's the treatment and the installation that's the key to whether EIFS works or not, because if it's not installed correctly, water can get behind it, it can get damaged pretty quickly. So it's really it's almost an installation issue almost as much as it is in the material itself.
Mr. Lambert?
So, Mr. Carlisle, other than the EIFS question, which I'm sure we'll be dealing with, your opinion is that the applicant has met everything that we asked them to?
Yeah, we found in a re-review that they've addressed every item sufficiently or exceeded what our expectations were based on the Planning Commission's comments.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Biedner?
I like what I'm seeing. You showed the blow up. You don't need to change it from there, but in the middle where they added the patios and the greens behind it, are there setbacks or?
Yeah, the closest, so I will go the little, the closest, so this is approximately 20 feet from each other. This is approximately 21 feet. So, I mean, this is.
What about 15 and 16?
That is 22 feet from here to here. So if these are 10 feet, these are, 5 feet or so apart from each other.
And that's.
There's no code requirement that dictates that they be set back a certain distance, One of the things we always say is not all sites are appropriate for all individual buyers. And I think they show on the plans. I'm sure this will be disclosed to future buyers, that this patio and the location. So if someone has a concern about privacy, they either won't purchase this particular unit because of proximity, or they may put up additional landscape screen to provide additional screening as well. So we don't have a concern about the proximity to each other. It's a little bit of just the buyer will be aware of what they're going to be purchasing.
And some people might like that. Yeah.
Some people might like it.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, if there are none, I'm going to call on the applicant to come forward if they have a presentation to make.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
can I ask a question of staff?
Absolutely,
For
you
the
may. Yes, absolutely.
So, Ben, I was curious, Ben or Brent, are there, you talked about the concerns about EIFS and how there's been some improvement. Are there benefits to EIFS relative to other types of materials?
I'm going to answer one real quick, and then I'll let the architect. My understanding is it's a little bit cheaper material. It's a lighter weight material, so you can do a little more with it. Those are what my understanding of what the benefits are, but I'll leave it up to the experts, the architects, to answer that question.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. I'm Mark Abenatha with Alexander Bogarts. Once again, we have our whole team, John Thompson with PEA and Joe Maniaci with Mondrian. Ben did a great job describing everything that we did. We walked out of the last meeting feeling like the community really liked the direction of the project that we were going, that it was close to being 100% of where we wanted to be. And with that, we made these changes. We think we're there. And it sounds like the main discussion is going to be EIFS now. We brought a sample along that I can pass around. As I mentioned, that the EIFS that was described by Ben in the past, it's nothing like the EIFS product that's out there now. As I also mentioned in the last meeting, we're not doing this to save money. EIFS in relation to brick, there's a lot of cost similarities to it. We're doing it for, as I mentioned in the last meeting, design aesthetics. Could you pull up the 3D, please? We wanted to get a monolithic look to the building in these elements. These are very important elements, these corner elements. We raised them because of their prominence. The way we projected the columns out here and central to the center of the building, these are all prominent elements. So we wanted to not only make them very important, but the material that was on them, we wanted them to be very monolithic, so that as you look at this facade and you look at this facade, there's potentially 3 different materials that I would use designing this building. It would either be EIFS, or it would be a metal panel, or a Hardy panel reveal system. The Hardy panel reveal system and the metal panels, you end up with a lot of scoring, reveals, you end up with a checkerboard look to the building. That's not what we wanted here. The other thing was just mentioned in the discussion by the Planning Commission. If you look at this design, these are not your typical retail where the facade ends here. It's just a false front that goes up. We put a lot of thought. We carried that detail back into the roof. This building is going to have a lot of exposure to it on the main road and the roads going in. It's a 4-sided building. On the back side of the building is the entrance from cars and pedestrians. The front is entrance is pedestrian. Over on this side, it's pedestrian and cars. So this building is 360 architecture all the way around. It's not your typical dress the front up and have block on the back. The majority of this building, in our opinion, is a masonry product. We have either brick on each one of these columns down at the bottom, as well as here. We've alternated that to create interest. We have stone in all of these elements. We ran our percentage calculations specifically to discuss what we feel is an accent material versus a predominantly brick and masonry material, stone. We're at about 30%, maybe a little more, in terms of the EIFS. We consider that to be an accent material. So it's design decision to have the monolithic. It's also what we consider to be an accent. If you measure just from the canopy in this general area, in that 2 to 8 feet, you look at these columns that are EIFS, that's about 5% of the building. So once again, we implore the Planning Commission. We've got an extremely rigid, I agree with Ben. The consultant reached out to the community. I don't know if they had a chance to talk to him. He asked if he could come to the meeting to explain to you how well it's detailed, if it's put on a good substrate, if it has the correct waterproofing. It's a phenomenal material. Many more architects are using it because of that. It's lightweight when you put it up over the roof. You're not having to support brick and masonry with steel. It's just, in our opinion, for the size of this building and the design that we're going after, we think it's a great solve. So, you know, we respectfully ask that the Planning Commission consider our comments on it. And we're, as I said before, we're extremely excited about this project. We think the residential and the retail component are going to be state-of-the-art, well-received by tenants and by the people purchasing this. So,
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Go ahead, Mr. Rizzo.
I just had a question on, you talked about the percentage of use on the building, but I heard you give 2. You said 30% and then 5%. So I was trying to understand the difference.
yeah, the
between
30%, we looked at each side of the building and we ran total percentage of materials. If you include all of the materials on the building, that's the 30% number. But what I wanted to point out is the discussions about EIFS being up high because of problems at grade, which we don't agree with because of the new material and how it's detailed. But keeping that in mind, if you look at this lower column area here, here below that belt line of the underside of the canopies, i.e. the head of the glass detail, that area on each one of these elevations, when you look at it in overall context, is about 5%.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I got a thought.
Sure.
That EIFS looks a lot better than what I saw applied to buildings on Crooks about 40 years ago. So, you know, it just,
It's not, yeah, it's not the same
I don't
product.
have an objection. I looked at that building, it's on Crooks, it's still there with all the EVIS. It's like a big office building. Anyway, the building there still looks good. Evidently, they maintained it or was installed properly. I don't know which, but I don't have any objection to including this in your design. I agree, especially because you wrap it going back into the roof line.
Correct.
It makes a lot of sense material-wise, so I have no objection with it.
Appreciate that.
Sure.
Go ahead, Mr. Lambert.
When I walked over to the site the other day, I noticed that there's been some changes in some of the tenants just to the north of you on Long Lake. Have you approached any of your potential tenants for this site, and do they express any concerns about how they might fit in with the existing commercial tenants? I won't name the name of the one specific tenant that's on Long Lake, but I was wondering if you've talked to any potential tenants.
For this building, I'd have to defer to Joe,
Okay.
not at this
All right.
time.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I have just a quick clarification that I seek on the EFS material. What's the longevity of the current EFS that you intend to use? Because I know we've had the discussion about it not being for long-term use. It may not be good, and that was the discussion for which we were leaning towards EFS not being used in so much area. But what's the longevity right now?
That's a good question. I do not know the exact answer to that. We can get that for the community, but as I said, it's being used more and more now. It's a very durable material. I would expect it to have good longevity.
Okay. And the awning that I see, is that metal awning?
Yes, all the awnings are metal.
Okay. Any other questions? Go ahead, Mr. Tagle.
Well, I will tell the commission that this material has been improved over the years through lawsuits. Lawsuits have brought the EFS to a different position so that they're not having mold behind because that's what happened. The water got into the system and couldn't get out. But anyways, so technically, if it's designed right and installed properly, it should be a relatively long-term. It's not going to be as long-term as a masonry product, a brick product, or something like that. I'm just curious, 30%, I trust that your math is correct. I'm looking at the other sides of the other elevations. Would you consider bringing up those masonry piers a little bit higher than just the 3 feet or whatever it is around the base of the building?
Well, we did that in the center, right here. You know, I think the beauty of the building is that it has a lot of variety to the design elements. As you go across the building, you go from low brick here and more of a strength to that end column. That's the way we set those prominent ends up. When you come to this point, this is all stone up to this point. Then we went to a little higher brick here.
Okay, that's hard
So-
to pick up on this.
Yeah, well, this screen doesn't really do it. I don't know if you look at the package that was submitted, you can see it a little.
Right now on my computer.
Yeah, I'm not sure why, but it is. If you look at our elevations, that's all called out. So that's where the masonry comes from. This is all masonry here, all masonry here, here. This is all stone here, here, masonry. So these are really the lowest points right here. If you go over to this side, this is all masonry. The stone goes up to here, and then the brick goes up over the top. So that's why I look at it as,
Well, I'm trying to help with the comments about EFS being an accent more than a primary, because when I look at these elevations, even though you're saying it's 30%, which I believe you, it's a pretty predominant element. I mean, that EFS is like right there. The brick piers, they go away, I mean, they're there, but visually, your eyes go up to the signage band, if you will. And I'm just wondering if there was something we could do to maybe reduce that EFS a little bit, just to, based on the comments and based on the requirements of the ordinance, that it be an accent material.
I just have to, I mean, we could do that to say, yeah, we'd justify a percentage of EFS that isn't even called out in the ordinance. I frankly like it the way it is. I like it with the low corner. It defines this corner element more. I want that detail to act like it's acting right there, and then let the stone come up and let the brick come up here. This is a different element that's in the center. I mean, we can do that, raise it up, but then it starts to look like this column here, and it starts to have a
I'm
horizontal
not
band.
suggesting that you can do one thing and not look at the entire facade. All I'm trying to do is minimize or reduce the amount of ephes on the building. You can do it however way you want to, but I think if I read the ordinance verbatim, it says it's an accent material. And even though you're citing 30%, I think it's visually more powerful than 30%.
And that's okay, because that's what we wanted to do.
Well,
We
it's
wanted
okay-
these to
It may be
be,
okay, but if it doesn't follow the ordinance, it's not okay. And if it's my interpretation of the ordinance, it's not okay.
okay.
So all I'm asking you to do is consider maybe increasing some of the other materials you have on that building and reducing. I'm not suggesting that your sign band or that area up top needs to necessarily change if you want that to be a monolithic look so that your signage pops out in front of that. Yeah, I understand that. But I'm just trying to strike an opportunity here that maybe you could get a little closer to what the ordinance requires than what I'm seeing here.
I don't know how to say it any differently than I already did. I
No, I'm
like
not
the,
asking
I
you-
like the
I'm
design.
not asking you to defend the design. You've already done that, and I appreciate that. But all I'm telling you is my response to what you said.
And I'm hearing you.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Just one more thing. You know, again, like Mr. Tagle said, not trying to design, you've done a very good job of designing the building, but, right on the corner buildings, you do have the ephes right at hand level. People can, put their hands on it or bump against it, or if they've got some kind of a, I don't know, not a shopping cart, because it wouldn't matter, because it would hit the lower brick. But it would be nice to see something more to protect those corners. Corners in buildings generally get to be a place where people, I don't know why, attracted to either touching it or banging into it. So I'm just thinking it would be nicer to see something else in the corners especially. And I like your design, there's no question. And I could see what you're getting at with your discussion. But again, like Mr. Tagle said, I would like to see a little less ephes on that, especially in that lower area. So I know you've got the brick there, you've got stone. I believe, is that the center building, the sports center? Is that some kind of a stone?
This, I'll go through it. This is brick here, here, and here. Next to this brick, this is all masonry.
Correct.
This is stone up to here, brick over the top.
Okay.
This is masonry up to eye level here,
That masonry is what material?
brick.
It's brick, okay.
Then beyond that, this is all masonry here. This is stone to the head of the door and all brick above. Then we have low brick here. So, I mean, if the plan, we obviously want to get this project approved tonight. That's our goal. If it's the feeling of the Planning Commission as a whole that you want to see the brick come up here to this, that's similar to what's going on here, we can do that. That's not my preference,
Yeah,
but.
I know what you want. You want to achieve those
Right, it changes the design, and I don't,
Yeah, I
yeah,
understand.
so I'm not going to argue anymore. I'll let you know on my position, and we're open. The most important thing right now is that we get the project approved, so.
Yeah, I can see your point of view too, as far as design.
Mr. Taylor?
The brick product that you're talking, is it a 4-inch veneer or is it a thin brick?
It's a 4-inch veneer.
Same with the stone?
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. We'll bring this back to the Planning Commission for discussion. Anybody would like to Go ahead, Mr.
Couple of
Biegler.
questions. I think this is for Brent. With 2 commissioners missing, do we need a 4-3 vote, or does it have to be 5?
It's more a question for Julie, but I can answer it for an action item like this. We need 5 affirmative votes.
And if I could ask Mr. Tagle to explain a little bit more of how it doesn't meet the ordinance, I'm curious what I'm missing.
My interpretation of the ordinance, when you talk about an accent material, you're not talking about as much, and again, part of the interpretation of that for me is the location of that ephes. If the ephes was down low and there was another material up high, I think the percentages would change, but the impact, the visual impact of that ephes would be reduced, because it's not like, here I am, I'm kind of shouting at you, you know, that's probably, I don't know, 12 feet to 20 feet in the air, the ephes band. You know, and again, you know, monolithic appearance, I understand that. They're not going to get, and there's going to be joints in that ephes, I'm sure of it, because of expansion and such. So I understand what they're going for. What I was trying to accomplish was, from my understanding of what an accent material is versus a non-accent material, the quality, other quality materials, the brick or the stone or the glass or metal roofs, I was trying to kind of close that gap a little bit.
Are you worried at all about safety? Is it sharp?
Not at all. What
Okay.
what
The
being
corners, is that sharp? I'm just trying to figure out.
sharp? Oh,
ephes.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I respect everybody on the commission. You guys have a great background for this. I look at buildings a lot, and I love this stuff. I like what I'm seeing, so that's just my opinion.
Go ahead, Mr. Fox.
Yeah, I guess from the explanation we got from Mr. Carlisle earlier is it really sounds like the risk with ephes is that it's going to be superficially damaged. It's not like it's a hazardous material or anything like that, or unsafe / you know, sharp or however you have it. So to me, that's more of a risk that the developer is assuming, because ultimately they're going to want the building to look good. And if it does get damaged, they know that they're going to have to be the ones to cough up and repair it. So with that being the biggest, you know, kind of purpose behind the regulation of ephes, I'm personally of the opinion that if it's gotten better over the past 40 years and it's not as prone to chip, I don't have that much of an issue with it.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Mr. Taylor.
Fox, can I ask you a question? What you just said about your concern of it being damaged, is that what, I mean, I'm not sure.
So my interpretation from how Mr. Carlisle explained the reason that we originally regulated ephes was because it would get superficially damaged from folks touching it, damaging it, etc. I may have misunderstood that. Please feel free to correct me if I'm incorrect.
Well, I'll let Ben talk to that, but I will tell you, there are different grades of ephes. And if you need a grade of ephes that can withstand a baseball bat, it's out there. There's ways to design that. So there are different levels. A lot of it depends on where is your building going to be located. If it's in an area prone to, you know, people damaging buildings, you know, there are ways to put a more stout, if you will, ephes up. I doubt very much that they're considering that in this location. Number one, because it is up a little bit higher, and I mean, look, we've done buildings with ephes before. It's not like we don't do buildings with ephes, but it will last. It will, and it has to be taken care of. There was a project in front of you probably a month and a half ago, or if not more, that had ephes on it, and the clients did not take care of the ephes, and it looked like heck. I mean, it was stained, dirty. They didn't keep it clean. The birds eventually got, you know, put holes in it. So, yeah, you got to maintain buildings, no matter what the material is. Sorry, Mr. Carlisle.
I didn't know if Mr. Carlisle wanted to
I
answer
think
it.
that was one of my point, maybe my other points got buried. Yeah, at a lower level, depending on the quality of the ephes, they are a little easier to damage than other material. But also, it's the water damage that we've seen in past ephes products that are not installed correctly. And two, just aesthetics. I think there's a discussion about whether or not that material is as aesthetically pleasing as a masonry material, wood material, or some other material use. So for those 3 reasons.
And just to not to beat a dead horse here, but we talk about quality building materials, EFS has come a long way according to the experts, but like if you think about quality and you think about traditional building materials, you think glass, brick, stone, you don't see 100-year-old buildings with EFS on them. So it's, in my interpretation of the discussion that we had years ago was not only the durability, but aesthetics/quality.
Mr. Lambert?
I guess my concern is, what Mr. Tagle expressed, is if the ordinance is saying it should be an accent material, is there some magic amount? Or I'm wondering if Mr. Tagle had an idea about some changes that would make it accommodate his concern about being accent material. So I agree with him that we should stick with the ordinance, so.
I feel that Mondrian Properties has a very qualified architect that can come up with some alternatives to what we're seeing here tonight, and I don't feel that I should be stepping into that arena and have that discussion.
Okay.
Mr. Paisley?
I support those two comments. I like the building, but when I look at it, I don't think it's an accent material. I think it's very prominent. And I understand why it's very prominent from the applicant's description, but the ordinance says something different.
Yes, Mr. Fox?
Is it possible to splice this up into potentially the residential portion and then the commercial portion? I'm just thinking, because, obviously toss this out to the commission if people have questions or concerns about the residential. It sounds like where we're kind of caught up is the EFS on the commercial portion of the property. So I almost think it might help the developer out a bit if we focus on the residential, like if we approve or, come to some consensus on the residential, pass that through, and then have them revisit the EFS on the commercial portion. But leave that up to everybody.
Go ahead, Mr. Savidan.
So my thoughts, second time we've considered this item at a public meeting. I think there was concerns related to the residential side that they related to landscaping, et cetera, that transition between the neighbors. They've addressed everything that was talked about last meeting. The only outstanding item is EFS. I've heard one of our members, who's also a registered architect, indicate that he believes that the architect is very capable of addressing this issue, and I think that staff is capable of reviewing and approving this issue administratively. I think what I would like, if that's the direction, if a majority of Planning Commission agrees with me, what we would need would be revised elevations, including calculations, showing the percentage of EFS in the revised elevations.
Mr. Fox, did you have something to say?
No, I'm good after that, sorry.
Mr. Lambert?
Before we go any farther, there's two members of the public came in late. I don't know if they were here to address this topic or not, so.
If anyone would like to come up to the lectern to speak on this topic, we are more than welcome to get your comments on this topic.
Okay.
Thank you. As a note of compromise, is there a way, and I'm asking this from the commissioners here, is there a way that we can say that we leave the EFS issue to the planning department and have them look into the reduction of the EFS material usage on this project and thus get this project moving and going along? Is that something that you're all good with?
I'm willing to make that motion.
Sure.
Yeah. Like to move formally, resolve that preliminary site plan approval pursuant to Article 8 and Article 5 of the zoning ordinance as requested for the proposed The Rookery of Troy mixed-use development comprised of 23 residential units and approximately 7,000 square feet of retail west of DeQuinder and south of Long Lake, parcels 88-20-13-228-003 and 88-20-13-228-015, Section 13, approximately 5.94 acres in size, currently zoned Neighborhood Node J District, be granted subject to the following conditions, with the following condition being that the applicant work with to the satisfaction of the planning department to reduce the APHIS on the overall frontage of the design for the commercial complex.
Go ahead, Mr. Taylor.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
I'll make sure. I want to make sure staff's all thumbs upping the way that's worded.
It's good to make sure that you guys are okay with the
You guys-
wording of the resolution.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that you guys are okay with the resolution.
I have a question.
Yes, Mr.
You
Daigle.
said the front of the building.
Oh, it was, frontage, facade, the entire building as a whole.
I would support that.
Okay.
Okay, we have do we have a first? We have Mr. Fox moving the resolution. Anybody seconding that?
Mr. Daigle.
Thank you. No discussion. We move to vote then. Ms. Zarniki, can you do the honors for us?
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Biegner?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Fox?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The vote has since been approved.
Thank you for moving the project along. We've worked with Ben and Brent. We'll come to a good conclusion in terms of adjusting those materials. Thank you.
Okay. Our next agenda item is public comments for the items that are on the agenda. Is anybody here present want to make any comments for items on the agenda? If you would like to, please come to the lectern, sign your name, state it in front of the commissioners, and then go ahead and make your comments.
Yes, not.
No.
Okay, I close the public comment section and move to Planning Commission comments. Let me start with Ms. Zarneki here. Ms. Zarneki,
I have none, thank you.
you're welcome. Mr. Fox?
Well, so I'm sure Brent is likely going to discuss last night how the Village of Hastings was not approved. And I went back and I watched the video in post today I was going through some of the city council comments, and I wanted to address a topic that has come up in this chamber quite a bit, and that's affordability. A couple of council members brought up how the Village of Hastings project wasn't necessarily affordable or attainable housing. And I think that's something that was brought up throughout our discussions here, is that it wasn't necessarily going to be the most attainable or available housing out there. And I completely agree. I think the way that we currently do these PUDs, and kind of PUDs are the only way that we're able to attain missing middle, it lends ourselves to these projects where we end up kind of, you know, pushing and trying to get missing middle housing out of these builds, but then ultimately the pricing of these houses is going to be high, just because of the nature of the market right now and the nature of the projects that we're approving. And I think it's important to note that really PUDs are a Band-Aid on the larger problem. And that is the fact that in many cases, missing middle housing is completely illegal in the city of Troy. You know, these developers, to get to this point where they're able to push for these type of builds, they have to go through a PUD, or they have to go through a cluster, or they have to find some mechanism that they're able to kind of tweak things and get in front of council to try to put things closer together, to try to address. And there's a couple different ways that Troy's ordinance does this. I mean, our mandated square footage requirements, mandated frontage, mandated setbacks. You know, we basically make it so that every house has to be large, it has to be expensive, and we basically set a minimum price on how much it costs to live in Troy. And I appreciate that council brought up the topic of affordability. It's something that I'm hoping with this upcoming ordinance rewrite that we're kind of looking at, it's something that we can talk about. I just wonder if it is worth having some kind of joint meeting with Planning Commission and council so we can kind of discuss the topic of affordability and try to get us all on the same page so that we're not necessarily, the planning department isn't necessarily spinning its wheels in one direction, but then council is more interested in going a different direction. Because I feel like it does happen sometimes, like where we approve a build or we approve a PUD and then it ends up being like a unanimous rejection from council. And it's like, okay, well, there's some kind of communication disconnect at least happening. And I think having some kind of session where we just smash our heads together and we talk about a topic might be helpful. But overall, again, I appreciate the council members who brought up housing affordability in Troy last night. That's something that hopefully we'll be able to try to tackle and take on in the next couple of years. So, thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Fox. Mr. Biegner?
I wasn't gonna say anything, but now I'm gonna. the stuff that was built in the 1960s cost this much to build. The stuff in the 1990s cost this much to build. The things now are costing this much to build. To think that we can build anything new and at any level to compete with the 1990s costs is never, ever going to happen. So I've always struggled with the different things. We need more green space, but we need more. That one's just a tough one. To build new at the prices that are out there right now is physically impossible, physically and financially impossible. So that's just it's just tricky to me. The more affordable housing, and we try to find little things like the Kurtz one had a lot of different apartments that was a little less expensive, but Somerset apartments were built in the 70s, I think, and it's less expensive. And I got a lot of friends that live there that found a way. So it's just tricky for us. And everybody that comes in here, they want to make money. They wouldn't be here if they weren't making money. And it's our job to try to rein them in. It's just hard because there are contradictions in what we're doing and what they're doing. So 2 cents from a bald guy.
Noted. Thank you. Mr. Faison?
I'm going to carry on with that same comment. I appreciate Mr. Fox's comment, but also yours, Mr. Binkner. And I just say affordability is the outcome of a lot of different inputs, right? So for us to really address affordability, we have to address maybe the whole zoning ordinance, right? And what's permitted and what isn't. So that's just a huge undertaking.
Yeah, I was just going to compliment Mr. Savinant on his presentation last night to City Council. He gave a good overview of planning and development and some good information on some of the different PUD projects over the years. So it was very informative for those who didn't know a lot about PUDs here in Troy. So good job. Oh, and thank you, Ms. Malahali, for your first meeting chairing. You did a good job. So.
Yes.
Thank you.
It only gets harder from here. So.
Not really.
Mr. Grant?
Just a couple of minor things. One, Mr. Fox said our ordinance makes it illegal to have an affordable house. I don't agree with that at all.
Traditionally considered missing middle, like courtyard housing, single story.
We don't make things illegal as far as building homes. The other item is talking about little homes. There's a planners gathering, again, by Oakland County. Tiny Homes in a Big City is the title, and it runs on August 20th. It's an online thing from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. So if you want to see tiny homes in a big city, tune in on August 20th, 10 to 11.
Thank you for that, Mr. Grant. Mr. Tagle?
I have to agree that the problem of affordable housing is much bigger than a zoning ordinance can control. And it's got to do with culture. It's got to do with the culture of the community and the mindset of the community. I mean, it's really a big thing. We've talked, and maybe it was before you joined us, about, well, how do we incentivize the builders, the developers, to want to do this? Because we visited other communities in this state that are far in advance of what our community is here, other parts of the country. So, you know, I appreciate the desire to continue to look at this, but to think that we as a commission or our governing ordinance or master plan can turn the trick, it's a much bigger issue than that. It's a much bigger issue than that. Thank you.
Mr. Frame?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Mr. Savidant?
So to fill in a couple of blanks for those who aren't aware, last night the City Council denied the Village of Hastings PUD application by a vote of 7-0.
Thank you. Mr. Carlyle?
I just want to be careful on some of the things that we say about whether things are illegal or not illegal or allowed. We actually allow missing middle technically in 8 of our zoning districts plus all the form-based districts. So those are permitted uses by right, and so you don't have to go through the PUD process in order to get missing middle. It's an option that's out there. It's not taken advantage of by many of the developers, but it's not something that you have to jump over significant hurdles from a zoning process to be on. So I want to be very careful. Anyone watching this, we do encourage, and we do try to promote miscellaneous housing, and we haven't opened up the zoning ordinance to allow for that use. So it's not a prescriptive thing where you have to go through the PUD process to miscellaneous. You can do it through by right zoning through, like I said, 8 of our zoning districts plus every form-based district. So I just want to make sure we're all clear with that, everyone's watching it, so that we do encourage it and we're trying to get more of it. Thanks.
Thank you for the clarification. I do agree with Mr. Lambert. Brent's presentation was awesome, and the fact that you rolled through all the projects that have been undertaken here in the Planning Commission and approved by the City Council, those were a good eye-opening exercise for everybody involved in understanding what a PUD looks, feels like, and also the process that's involved behind the PUD. So thank you for that. And I would like to also say this, that I was a little disappointed that we did not get a positive affirmative vote, but I understand where City Council was coming from, and true to the fact that they have to listen to all the residents and make their decision, which is understandable. But we here at the Planning Commission, I'm very proud to be part of this. I will tell you that for sure, that we worked through that process and we brought back the applicant not once but 4 times. And he listened to us, we worked with him, we were open to the residents' comments, we listened to them every time that they came here. So we will continue doing to the best possible ability what we have been entrusted with by the city and by the residents of the city. So thank you very much. It is a great pleasure and joy to work with all of you, and thank you for your support today. Appreciate it. And so I adjourn the meeting for today. Thank you.
Very nice.